Hello, and welcome to The New Normal, a six-part series on COVID-19 and its impact on every aspect of our lives. The shows are produced by students from around the world. I'm Anna Ashite.
I'm Emily Schulman.
I'm Caroline Bacha.
I'm Caitlin Krestiankova.
And I'm Megan Larson. We're all students from Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada.
Today, we're talking about something that was already on everyone's mind before the virus struck, the environment.
In an era of environmental change and a worldwide student-led movement led by Greta Thunberg, it finally seemed as if we were making some progress.
But with the lack of action from government officials, we thought they weren't taking us seriously.
Now that we've gone into self-isolation, it's almost like the environment has started repairing itself. Now we're left wondering, could this be a blessing in disguise for the environment?
We'll get into that and more, but first, why do you all think it takes a crisis for people to finally make a change?
I think it's that immediacy of a crisis. I think unless people kind of have the adrenaline of panic running through them, they don't necessarily think of it as a long-term problem. But with that being said, there are still people who doubt a crisis as it's happening, like right now, as we see with a lot of COVID doubters. So, this environment crisis has been going on for so long, and there's not this immediate damage happening. And so it's not at the forefront of their minds like a virus is.
Do you remember all the climate change deniers? It was crazy.
Yeah,
Anna.
So strange because there's also climate change deniers who are actually leaders. Wired.com, they actually put out a really interesting piece, and it was kind of comparing COVID-19 to the environment from the perspective of Donald Trump. And as we know, Donald Trump was a COVID-19 denier and an environmentalist denier as well. So it was kind of interesting to see how when statistics are put out there and when things are actually in your face and people are actually being faced with this virus, you can't really deny it any further. But then I wonder what it'll take for him to actually stop denying the environment.
I remember he was calling it a democratic host. What do you think, Emily?
I think that it's the deaths that help to make it real in this case. In New York City, they had to have freezer trucks come in to be able to hold all of the bodies because their morgues are overflowing, which is absolutely devastating. And we're witnessing this firsthand versus potentially witnessing the effects of climate change much later in our lives. So I really agree with Caitlin that it's this immediacy of the crisis that is springing people into action.
Yeah, and the immediacy, although COVID has its doubters on how severe it is, it's pretty hard to deny what's actually going on today, every day, the past few weeks, that people are dying. You can't deny the numbers.
Yeah, especially when we see it in our news and everything, and we've all been asked to stay home. So I guess that kind of segues into our next topic. Now that we're all in lockdown, how have you guys seen the environment changing around you?
I feel like it's cleared up a lot. You look at the Toronto streets and there's no cars. It's brighter. It just kind of feels like our carbon emissions are way down. I noticed my gas is lasting a lot longer, and I think that's contributing to a lot less smog in the air.
I definitely agree with that. I've seen a lot less litter as well. So there's clearly people not being out as much. It's contributing to a lack of trash on the streets. I even saw deer in fields near what would usually be a busy road, and is now a much quieter place. And I hadn't seen deer there in ages.
Wow. I think alongside animals returning to their natural habitat, something that I've been seeing is the social dynamic of being willing to have deep conversations has completely changed. I think conversations that weren't socially acceptable or ones that you would have over the table are now those conversations that we all want to have. And I think a lot of that has to do with we're more tuned into the news. We want to know what's going on. And a lot of us are more willing to have these conversations via Zoom or whatever means necessary. And it's great.
How about you, Caroline? What do you think?
I agree. And a news story I've seen recently is, I guess it's not their natural habitat, but animals in Wales, goats have been just taking over the streets of Wales since there isn't much car traffic anymore. So it's funny to see how free these animals are becoming now that they don't have the threat of so many humans around them.
Yeah, and that segues perfectly into kind of these shots that we have collected here. So these types of effects, as we know, have been happening all around the world. And you can see in this photo here that the sky is so clear in India.
Wow.
Fog is cleared so much that you can see the Himalayas. It's also at an all-time low over China. I mean, just look at this map.
The active tracking of that map has been something that my mom and I check every single day. Like, it's so cool to see.
It's like when we put our lives on hold for a second, the planet has a chance to sort of rejuvenate itself and to almost breathe again. Like, everything starts to come back to life in a way that we hadn't seen in so many years.
Yeah, I think well, the other thing is as well, like, we have a lot of animals that are on the endangered list that people aren't really paying attention to, that have been on there for years, like giant pandas and everything too. And these are all animals that we don't necessarily think of as going extinct, but they're at a very high risk. It's just not publicly known as much, I think.
Oh yeah, and I think with this lockdown, that risk is going to be greatly reduced just because we're not interfering. I've seen a lot of posts saying we are the disease as humans. What do you guys think of that statement?
Yeah, well, it's a harsh statement, but it does hold some sort of truth. I mean, I've seen a lot of these diagrams of animals who are held in captivity in zoos, and a lot of people are likening it to the quarantine that we've been going through. So I hope from this we're going to be able to have more compassion, more empathy for animals who are in confinement right now, having gone through that experience. So I hope that's also another aspect of animals returning to their natural habitat, or at least being cared for properly in these zoos and aquariums.
And Emily and Caroline, what do you think?
I think we have to ask ourselves whether or not our current way of life, or our way of life the way it was before we went into isolation, is incompatible with a healthy planet.
Yeah.
I agree. And I was going to add on to that it'll be interesting to see from here what type of things will change, and how, if things will begin to go back to normal, or if we see a positive change based on people actually seeing the difference.
I think the one thing is the planet is always going to end up healing itself. I think, Emily, I think you mentioned that earlier, like this rejuvenation of the planet. I mean, we saw a meteor wipe out the dinosaurs and then, enter man into the picture. So are we like the new dinosaurs that are damaging, and then we're going to go, and then the planet's going to be fine again? So I don't know.
I've seen documentaries like that. It's crazy how much of an impact that we have on the environment on a day-to-day basis. And an interesting thing I heard from one of my relatives is, there's a pandemic that happened in 1720, 1820, 1920, now 2020. And, my family member just kind of joked, oh, maybe it's just the earth has to rebalance itself every 100 years because we're impacting it so much. And she was just joking, but what do you think of that?
There's truth to that too. It's so interesting because even with farmland, I mean, I think a lot of it is our like excessive need of agriculture, but farmland needs 7 years. After 7 years, it needs a year to rest. And we're no longer like taking note of these things anymore. And we're no longer paying attention to the environment that's around us. It's like our needs come first. So it's going to be interesting when the environment finally says, okay, it's my turn now. But hopefully it doesn't get to the point where it's like COVID-19, where we're forced to make these changes, where we're forced to kind of be compassionate for one another. We should kind of just start to implement these things naturally into our society.
Yeah, and with the environment, there's a huge gap in our generation's reactions. We saw more and more Gen Z protesters on the streets fighting for their future. But with COVID-19, how do you feel Gen Z is differing from other generations? Is it better? Is it worse?
I think that Gen Z has been less concerned than I would personally think they would have been.
Yeah.
Just because they don't think it's going to affect them. They feel invincible. They feel too young and too strong to be sickened by this, and certainly too young and too healthy to die from it.
And I hate to get, I was just going to say, there's always these stereotypes about Gen Z and millennials saying that, we're self-absorbed, and this crisis just kind of reveals that really we are, because there's a lot of elder people and a lot of vulnerable people that are at risk here, and yet Gen Z is still going out and trying to party and drink on Ezra Street like at Laurier and everything like that. So
oh yeah, spring breakers, did you see them? I think they all went to Florida as this first broke out, and they said, I'm not going to let it affect my spring break that I planned. But how selfish is that?
Well, even now people are back on the beaches in Florida. Like there's thousands of people that are like, whatever, I'm going to go swimming. It's nice out.
They opened them up again, actually. So people have flocked to the beaches and nothing seems to stop them.
Yeah, I think that there's two extremes when it comes to Gen Z. I think that there's those who, as you guys know, I'm not sure, I know with my parents, they're on WhatsApp a lot more and they're looking at a lot more news online. And a lot of it is misinformation. So I feel like there is that generation of Gen Z or that demographic of Gen Z, rather, who are trying to correct that misinformation that their parents are giving them, just like, oh, this is statistically wrong and actually this is true. And then I think that there are those who are using this as an opportunity to gather with their friends. Recently in my neighborhood, which is Brampton in Ontario, just a little way out of Toronto, there were a group of teenagers who actually just got an $800 fine each, or there was like 5 of them in a car for having a pizza party in a car. So I think that there kind of doesn't seem to be a real balance. There's either those who understand the dangers of what's going on and who are trying to inform their parents, or there's those who are just seeing as this is just a regular day, and it's not, because it affects people who either have autoimmune diseases or who are in a different demographic than us, and we need to do our part.
It can kind of be, for lack of a better word, boiled down to selfishness for both generations. Like, for instance, maybe the older generation that is not doing their part in helping climate change, their thought process could be that they won't be the ones living through the effects of it, and the ones who are denying the seriousness of COVID will also not be the ones immediately affected, most likely, unless they have compromised systems. So.
Yeah, and Caitlin, you have a compromised immune system, right?
Yeah, I do. I'm immunosuppressed. I know Emily is as well. We're both in that boat together. So it's been weird just being, like, my brother's a frontline worker right now working in a grocery store. And so when he comes home, we have to like bleach the floor behind him and sanitize all the handles he touched. Like, his clothes immediately go into the washing machine, and we're separate even though we're in the same house. And he personally has said, like, oh, it's been here since November, so it's really not that big of a problem. Like, it's just a flu. We're going to be fine. And that worries me, knowing that he's the person that's on the front lines. I'm like, are you actually wearing your mask at work? Like, we've asked you to or no? And yeah, so it's been a little bit stressful in that way. And it's also disappointing to see a bunch of people from our generation having that mentality of, oh, well, if they're vulnerable, they can just lock themselves up. The rest of us are going to just continue the world out here. I
think
and
that
Emily, what's your
common
take?
theme between selfishness in this and selfishness in our discussion about the environment. Either way, it's going to be our actions or our inaction on things that are going to cost people their lives, cost the planet its health. We just don't care enough about our fellow human beings anymore. And we certainly don't care about our planet to be able to make long-lasting and acceptable changes.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a lot of things on social media of people saying, like, oh, you know, the boomers want us to protect them now, but they wouldn't listen to us when we wanted to protect our futures and the environment. So what do you guys think about that?
I think we should be protecting each other, honestly. I feel like the baby boomer generation should care more about the environmental crisis that our generation is going to face at their age. And I think we should care more about them in the COVID-19 crisis. I mean, people our age can get it, and we know this, and this has been proven. Although a lot of us survive, a lot of us don't. But even removing us from the picture, let's just say we were totally immune, like some people think. Well, what about your grandparents? What about your parents? You know, you've got to look out for other people. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to make a better world. Just it seems so simple, but it's not easy enough for people to do, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, as we've seen in this lockdown, the environment is pretty much thriving without humans being involved in it. So do you think that we're going to learn from that mistake, or are we just going to go back to our old ways when all of this is over?
I hope learn, but I mean, that's me being positive. But like I was saying before, I think hopefully people will see a noticeable change, that they enjoy the animals out, clear air, just when they're out for their walks, social distancing, that maybe this is something we can strive for going forward.
The lockdown.
Anna, what do you think?
The lockdowns that we're experiencing, they're not going to last forever. Oh, Sorry, but I think my internet is just a little bit finicky because we are doing this on Zoom. So bear with me if I'm lagging. But the lockdowns, as I was just saying, they won't last forever. So what we need to do is find a way to make sustainable changes that will be in place past this duration. So when we get back into, commuting to work, are we able to carpool? Are we able to make better choices of, can we walk to the grocery store that's in our neighborhood and just grab some stuff to get exercise? Or do we really need to pack up the car and go do that? I think if we're able to make an effective plan in place, we can genuinely make actual change in our environment that's going to sustain us.
Yeah, and maybe because we're so cooped up inside, we'll start to see the value of that, and we'll start to see the value of walking and actually getting some activity in, because I think by the end of this, people will be sick of being in their cars,
Absolutely.
Right. And Emily, what do you think about all this?
I fully agree, and I think it's concerning that you mentioned people getting back in their cars. I think of people going back to work. I think of factories opening up again, and I feel like we're in for more of the same unless we really start caring about each other, caring about our planet, caring about the world as a whole. I think the change really needs to start on a personal level, and it has to start with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's hard to do with, personal consumption as well, because the manufacturing in China is so massive because they're like the epicenter of the world, like so much is made in China. And so I think if they were just going to slap back into that manufacturing, then we're going to have a lot more pollution back in China again. So I'm wondering if the people there are going to be willing to step up and, try and fight for some more eco-friendly, ways to manufacture, if we can spread that around a bit more. I don't really know what the solution is here. But with that said, is that a threat to the economy as well? Because, if we hit a recession, it's because people aren't consuming, people aren't spending. So is that going to be a problem as well if, we bring the environment in? So I don't know.
I think people will still spend, the way that I look at it is people need to eat and people need the basic necessities. People are always going to find a way to entertain themselves. And I think that, economy be damned. We need to take care of our people and our planet first, because that's what matters, right? If our planet is surviving and we are surviving, then we're doing something right. And as long as we're taking care of everybody, then we can figure out the economy.
Yeah, and I think this lockdown has actually showed us that a lot of our workplaces actually can work remotely. I know that a lot of people, in the past where you say, oh, am I able just to take Fridays and work at home? And it's no, it's not possible. Working with a team in person, it can't be beat. It's fantastic to have human connection. We have realized that there are a lot of jobs that we can do from home. So I hope that that's something that we'll implement, which will also cut down on commuting. Like Emily said, we're going to be just taking more time to work where it doesn't, maybe outside in the garden, and be aware and put more effort into our garden and into spaces that are outside as well. I think that will help with people's mental health. It'll help with people's well-being. I see no downside to that. It's like both wins.
We can balance things. It's a balancing act.
For sure.
Yeah, and Caroline, what do you think?
I agree, totally. Balancing act, and just we need to, hopefully this makes positive change. I think that's my overall thought about this.
And that just about wraps up our show. Thank you for joining us on this segment of The New Normal, and stay safe.
Find all of our videos of The New Normal on YouTube and Facebook. Stay safe, stay busy inside, and stay healthy, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys.